Hello and welcome to February edition of Women's Writers Fest. It is the only traveling film festival focused on women. And this month we are back again with a day filled of new and engaging discussions. Our panel right now is titled Creative Tips for Writers. And we have with us Mona Verma, who is an award winning author of 8 works of fiction and over a dozen anthologies. She has edited various science journals, self-help books, biographies, and specializes as a poet in haiku and tanka. We also have with us Dr. Harshali Singh. Harshali is a New Delhi-based member judge of District Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, an author, a poet, and an academician, and an occupational therapist. Her poems are part of several women-centric anthologies of poems. We also have with us Anu Singh Choudhary. Anu is a writer, translator, and filmmaker. She has written across formats including radio, TV, films, and new media, and has written and directed award winning documentary and web series. Our moderator for the day and the guest curator for this panel is Kanchana Banerjee. Kanchana is the author of Nobody's Child, A Forgotten Affair, and her latest book is titled Eye on You. I welcome you all on behalf of She the People, and without wasting much time, I'll hand over the session to Kanchana for moderation.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepshika. Thank you, She the People. Thank you, Shelley, for having me, for making me part of your annual Women Writers Fest. It's such a delight to be part of it, to interact and to meet other authors and discuss what is favorite to all of us, stories, writings, and books. So we're going to be talking about the creative writing process, the process of writing, and hopefully sharing some little nuggets of experience from our individual creative journey. So my first question to three of you, all of you, is that how does the creative process begin for you? Does it begin with an idea? Does it begin with a character? Does it begin with a scene? Is it a place? Is it a bit of a song? How does it begin? And let's start with Mona.
Um, okay. Thank you so much, Harshali, and thank you, She the People, for having us here. And that's a wonderful question because for any writer, it is the beginning that really matters. For the reader, it is the ending, as far as I can say. For me, like creative writing is just 5% writing, and I think 15% it's like Googling for some motivation, and 80% is like literally staring at the screen, wondering what to do. For many young people, they can get demotivated at this stage, but if you believe me, I have had weed of the finest quality of cactus growing in my think space for most part of my writing life. But then motivation does come from somewhere. For me, story writing has been generally a spin-off from what I had read I had read in my growing up years. Like, for example, it was O. Henry, Somerset Maugham, The Moon and the Sixpence, Princess September, Mitch Albom, Premchand, Rabindranath Tagore, Isma Chugtai, Edward Lucas, where I used to love the twists and the denouements. Right. The writing preferences started shaping my thinking and also my writing. So there's a certain flavor that we borrow from what we have read when we were growing up. So, for other people also, I'll say, for young writers, that's always advisable to choose the genre that you love to read. So we write better because we know what clicks, because that is what
True,
we like about those books.
true.
And then I started almost like emulating my favorite writers' endeavors, right? And but there was another point over there. You just cannot learn to write from reading them. Like we don't learn to drive a car just by mugging the journal that comes with it, right?
Yes, so
So reading,
Mona, I'm going to have to interrupt you here.
yeah,
We will come to the process of plotting and detailing the characters a little later. I just wanted
okay,
to get initial reactions from all of you.
okay,
Anu, I wanted to ask you that you have written a lot more than just Arya, but since Arya is making news, is making waves, and everyone is talking about it, Shushmita Sen and the fantastic season 2. So when you started writing Arya, what sparked your creative process? Was it the character Arya? Was it something else? Was it a theme that got you going? Just take us through your creative process of writing Arya.
A very good question, Kanchana. Thank you for asking because I actually made a transition from being a novelist slash story writer to being a screenwriter, and the process is very very different. Unlike being a novelist or when you're writing a book, when you completely own the idea, the seed comes from your mind and you begin to work on it, and the characters take you through and plotting happens. Screenplay is a very different ballgame altogether. It's a collaborative process. You're not the only one who's creating it. There are directors attached to it. There are other writers. So when I had come into when I was brought in to write Arya, in fact, I was the last person in the writers' room, and there's something called writers' room. So
I know.
everybody contributes to that, and that's how a long format is written. When I was brought in, and was when we start talking about the story, the character, it was obviously the character. And the first thing I remember telling Ram Advani, who was the creator, in our first meeting itself, and he was showing me the presentation and taking me through what the story is going to be like. The first thing that struck me was the name Arya itself, and I told him that it's just so wonderful that this character, that the name of the character in itself is a complete character. Arya means noble woman, somebody who's complete in herself. Arya. So the name itself speaks of the character. So because it was just so organically, everything was coming together so well. I didn't really have to do much apart from just bringing in a lot of my experiences as a woman, as a mother, and uh, just follow the creative process of the writer's room, where there were other directors and there was another writer. And in fact, for Arya season one, that I was in fact the youngest in the sense, not in terms of just age, but also in terms of experience. I was the youngest in the
Experience.
writers' room, so I was allowed, but I was also the only woman in the first season.
Okay. Okay.
That
Okay.
helped me a lot because then the writers' room was relying heavily on me for a lot of these internal journeys and conflicts. So that's how the process is. That's how it is.
And
You
did you and the team already know that Shushmita Sen would be playing the
No,
role of
no,
Arya? No, you
no.
didn't.
We
That was
never.
decided later.
So much, much
Okay,
later. And screenwriting, that's
much
the joy
later.
of screenwriting.
Of
It's very
course.
rare that you would know who's going to play your character. You actually create the character first, and somebody else comes and
And then fit someone in.
makes it,
True.
yeah, imbibes it and makes it her or his own. So
Okay,
you
great.
never write to the actor. You just
Of
write you're true
course.
to the character.
Of course. Okay, so Harshali, pretty much the same question to you, but with a little bit of a variance because I know that you have written. I mean, your third book is about to be released, and it's part of a series. So so my question like remains the same, but with a little bit of a difference. As in, when you started writing the first book, was it the seed of the idea already in your mind that you're going to write three books? Panning three generations and take the story ahead? How was the creative process of writing three books based on one character when you started writing the first book?
So essentially, the Haveli series is not one character. It's a family living in the Haveli, which has seven children. Each book is based on one sibling, basically one child. So the first book, what you're asking me is how did I think of so many stories, and was that's what your question is. So yes, the stories were there, and there was an idea that that is what I wanted to write, and it was like a huge thing. I mean, I at that time I didn't think it was huge. I just thought it was doable, and so I just
Yeah.
started. And as you said, you know my writing best because you were the one who kind of pushed me, off the cliff
Yes, and we
with the
will come to that
workshops.
later
Yes,
about how
yes,
we got into writing. We
yes.
will come into
Uh,
that.
so
Great.
yes, the stories were there, and the ideas were there. I think because I've always held my occupation and my professional life has been with dealing with people on an everyday basis. So I've been absorbing so much. That's what I understood. Like a sponge, I've been absorbing the characteristics of people and their stories, and because you get to hear
Of
so much
course.
as
Of
a
course.
teacher, as a principal, and then as a judge, that somewhere or the other these issues start kind of seeping into your psyche.
Of
And
course.
so many questions come out, that why is this happening? And being a very staunch questioner, uh, it was very natural for me to kind of write about it, and probably try to see if I could find the answers, or what was my take on it. So
Great.
that was where it started from. And the first book is about the second marriage and marital violence, etc. The second book is about how Indian children or young ladies of our country, are they ready to make a decision which is very western in its nature, but it's slowly coming into our you know our surroundings as well. And the third book is, of course, a different, it's again a mystery and family dynamics, etc. So, yes, the idea was there, and that is where the stories germinated from. But then, as I said, that as you meet so many people, you interact with them, you engage with them, and every story, I evolved, and so did my stories. So maybe the crux of the story remained the same, but it had to be very naturally be affected by the times that we live in. And so in each story, even I, as an author, when I read them, sometimes I see, oh my
Of
god,
course.
I know where my headspace was at that time.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, Mona, I want to ask you, what has been, you've written so many books and you've written books across genres and different kinds, anthologies, short stories, and now you are writing something which is based on our ancient texts. You've written about the widows of Benares, a beautiful story. So, different things. So, what would you say has been the greatest influence in your creative process or a creative journey as an author?
The greater influence, honestly, Kanchana, as I said, we borrow a lot from what we have read as children, because I believe that leaves a very profound effect on how we behave, how we see things, and because whatever is it that has interested you really also spills onto paper as you write, right? So but when I write, because I've written lots of historical fiction, lots of mythology, it gets different when we start writing. Of course, you draw inspiration from what you've read, but when you start writing, for example, I've written lots of historical fiction. Now, whether you are writing this historical fiction as a part of that history or as a witness to other people's stories, right? So also you need to decide on the kind of narrative that there is. Firstly, I brainstorm as many ideas and thoughts onto paper without worrying about, the grammar or the spellings and stuff like that. You just write what you really want to, something that has influenced you. And I am always very keen to bring in history. I'm very keen to bring in reality into what I'm doing. Now, as we were just talking about my latest book, Deve Sutras, that will be coming out in April. About that book, when the idea was thrown at me that why don't you write about the Mahapuranas, it is a very difficult realm to dive into. For example, one reason that I was slightly reluctant was lots of these characters are also worshipped in our Indian culture. So there is a no-go zone in certain areas. And then there are stories that are completely bizarre stories, and you're left scratching your head. How something like this possible with the gods and stuff like that? Then you have to cull out the stuff that is that you are convinced about, because till you are not convinced about any episode in history or any episode from the mythology, you cannot convince the reader as well. You are not trying to appease them, you need to convince them. So you
Of
need to be
course.
convinced yourself, give it an interpretation which where it's not like a huge ground to cover between the author and the reader, and the new generation is also agrees to what the author is writing. There's a completely different brain mapping here in today's times. You just cannot throw anything at people and they will swallow whatever you're giving. So various genres basically help me identify my strengths and also my
Hmm.
weaknesses, and
Wonderful.
also they lend a
Hmm.
different character. So when you are writing humor, you understand that
Hmm.
this is actually no fun writing
Hmm.
humor per se. It's like, it's not like a game. Writing
Hmm.
humor is serious business.
Of
Or
course,
writing
and I'm
mythology,
so
or
and I'm
fiction,
so
it is
and I'm so
content.
glad that you brought in the this thing. You kind of spoke about writing for the modern generation or the current generation, which kind of links it to my next question, which I want to ask Anu. That Anu, you used to earlier write books, as in you were writing in Hindi, and I think you also wrote in English, and so and then you made the transition to writing for the for the audiovisual medium. So and for the last about 4 5 years, there has been a complete explosion of the OTT platforms. It has entered into not just our rooms but bedrooms, and people are hooked onto these serials. And then there are kind of mobile app based reading. So do you think that these alternate mediums of storytelling, they influence the writer's creative process? What I mean by this, I'll just give you a small example. When I was writing Eye on You. Now, Eye on You, some of you may have read. I don't know, but like Eye on You has a character who is posing as someone else in the story, and that plays a very important part in the story. So when I was discussing this with a friend of mine, so the first thing she said, that Kanchana, it's going to be so difficult to portray this as a movie or as a web series, because how will you show a person impersonating? But I did not let that color and let that affect my thinking of the story, because I'm not writing for the story to be adapted to a movie or to a series. I want to write the story in the best possible way. So my question to you, Anu, is that the explosion of these mediums and these platforms, do you think they in some way compel the writer to think and write and create in a certain manner, which would be easily adaptable for the which would make the story easily adaptable to these platforms?
I do believe that the writing for each medium is very, very different from one another. And I also believe that one format feeds into the other. So all the stories must actually travel from one format to other as much as possible. So I'm a great champion of adaptations. I'm a great champion of translations, not just from formats but also from languages. Having said that, the fact of the matter is, like you rightly said, audiovisual medium has its own challenges, and the first challenge is that the constraint rather is that it's not a writer's medium. It is a medium which brings together all art forms. So you have, of course, music, you have acting, performing art in various forms. You have the art direction, you have the sound design, you have so many art forms coming together. And writing is just the roadmap. It's just the first part of putting together of art forms coming, amalgamation of all these art forms. Therefore, the writing for that medium has to cater to allowing spaces for these other art forms also, and therefore there are constraints. Therefore, the screenplay is written in a certain way. Therefore, it cannot be stream of consciousness. Therefore, it has a certain kind of a grammar, and you need to learn one from the other. Like when I am writing a screenplay, I need to detach myself and forget my being as a novelist, because when that begins to come into play, then it becomes very difficult to write for the medium, because you are writing, when you are writing on demand, there are cliffhangers that need to be there have to be hook points, there has to be a certain intrigue that has to happen, even if it's a love story. So there is a very so there is the screenwriting, the craft of screenwriting is a very specific one, which one needs to learn and follow, and it's a very disciplined kind of a writing. Therefore, the other kind of writing, which is writing for books, is something that I find extremely liberating, because it does not bind me. It does not. It allows me to go all out in in going crazy with the characters, with the plots, with thought processes, without worrying about how it will be perceived. Unfortunately, as screenwriters, we're also told to always keep in mind what the audience will like, what the audience will be thinking, what the
Hmm.
audience will
Hmm.
be feeling. So definitely you're catering to the audience all the time, and it happens somewhat to the audio medium also. When you write, I have written a lot for the audio medium. I've written for Audible and also for radio shows. That also has, it has, the break point has to come at a certain time. There has to have a hook. So
Of course.
all of these are very, there are,
Yeah.
it's sort of
These are
constraints.
very important elements of writing for that. Great.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's what. So therefore, the two creative processes are very different from each other, and therefore, at least I can't speak for others, but at least for me, I go from one to the other to seek refuge.
Great. So, Harshali, my next question is for you. Before I ask the question, I would like to tell our viewers that I met Harshali for the first time at a writing
Retreat.
workshop that I was conducting along with a common friend of ours called Kiran Chaturvedi. This was a small company which we had founded called Write and Beyond, and Harshali had kind of joined that workshop, and she is so determined and so sincere that the story that she started writing in the workshop, she kind of went back home, and in the next, I think, 6 7 months, she finished it. And so I think, she is full credit for perseverance, determination, and hard work. And my next question to you, Harshali, is linked to that. So obviously your journey began from the writing workshop that you attended, and you obviously kind of benefited a lot from that, because that's what kickstarted your journey as an author. So tell me, a lot of people think that writing is a very instinctive process, and you don't need to do a course, which I don't agree, because I love enrolling for various writing courses. So tell me, how was doing this writing course beneficial for you, and how did it channelize your creativity?
So I completely agree that I think writing is very instinctive and intuitive, and but with everything else, like you need a little bit of foundation, you need some grounding and groundwork. That is where I was lacking, and I could probably identify it, that the muse would come in spurts, and then the story would just be lying around, and I wouldn't know what to do with it. And of course, I come from a family of readers, but not writers at all. So my introduction, or my sort of, what should I say, um, the fact that I was writing was in itself a very big thing. And I was reading a lot of judgments. I was, my father being from that field and everything, so the writing was very different. And it was very evidence based, etc. So that was a very different thing that was happening at that point of time. Creative writing is a completely different genre. And so I wanted to write, but I didn't know how. I didn't know the know-how of that foundation that I needed to know, and hence the workshop, which really, of course, helped. And it kind of, somehow, it something clicked, and I knew, okay, this is the next step. Because I feel the main problem with the channelizing your creativity is that you have the idea, but you can just go on and on, and you can just linger on, and the characters will take you on their own journeys. And so to collect it all back and make sure that there is a proper arc, uh, is something that you need to learn. And I think
True.
that is where the workshop helped, um, tremendously, I have to say. And as you very rightly putting it, the story that I began writing at the workshop, I finished. And that was my first book. And so at that point of time, I knew I could do this. And with, as with everything else, you need to be tenacious, you need to be determined, that you're going to do this, you are going to reach the end of the
Of
tunnel. And
course, of course.
of course, a great support group.
I totally and completely agree with you, Harshali, on about this. That doing a writing course kind of helps enormously.
Yeah.
In the past, long ago, in 2007, I mean, I've been writing for publications and for companies for almost donkey's years, but I just couldn't wrap my head around writing a story, and I always wanted to kind of be to write fiction. And so I have done writing courses, online writing courses with London School of Journalism, and more recently with Curtis Brown Creative, which is also a London-based literary agency. They conduct these online courses. In fact, for my 25th wedding anniversary, which was last year, and my husband said that, since we can't travel, what do you want? I said, you gift me this online course, and I find it, I find it extremely interesting to study the art and craft of this thing. So my next question, pretty similar, is also to Mona. Mona, have you ever done a writing course? You're such a prolific writer. We've never got around to talking about this. Have you ever done a writing course in your life?
No,
Okay. Any
I must
particular
profess
reason?
and
Any
confess.
particular reason why you've not done, or I mean, it just didn't happen?
It just didn't happen also because, see, I was an avid reader and I just felt that, whatever I needed to know about writing was coming from that reading per se, right? Because as they say, for a good writer, reading always gets a first billing, right? So drawing inspiration from what you're reading, gave me the motivation to write better in, or whatever you might say it, right? So I guess, and as far as I'm concerned, I think I'm very imaginative in my approach towards things. Even for the corporate trainings that I conduct, people have come back to me, executives have come back and said, how could you think of something like this, to teach us like this, have a kind of activity, or use film songs, right, to drive the point in. So I said, I guess somewhere, you have an inherent essence and you cannot take the most intimate essence from a person ever, right? So I guess I was imaginative by nature, never really thought of going in for a course until I heard you today, Kanchana. So I think I might apply for one, because I also come across, many are dead in the water kind of situations, where literally, as I said, I have cactus and weeds growing in my think space. I do come across those. Maybe joining a course will help me tide over those more easily. So it will be, I haven't reached the stage where I thought, I should be learning, unlearning and relearning. So my reading has helped me so far.
Great,
And
lovely.
but I think
Okay.
so, I should apply now. Hearing you
Yeah, you should
state
also.
that, I think
It's
so.
it's
Why
always
not?
it's always interesting to learn. So, Anu,
Yes.
my next question is to you, that when you made the shift from writing books to screenplay, and as you mentioned that screenplay writing is very nuanced, and it has different nuts and bolts. So did you enroll for any screenplay writing course?
I did actually, and the first course was like a weekend thing with a very renowned TV writer, Vinod Ranganathan, who's now an FTII faculty. And I remember the first thing that he said in the classes was way back in, I think, 2012 or 13. And the first thing that he said in the class was that you learn to write only by writing. That was his introductory line, and that said it all. Having said that, I have gone back again and again to not to writing courses, but somehow to setups where you continue to learn. So while I was writing for radio, I was a part of Nilesh Mishra's Mandali, which was again a school in itself, where you would present your stories and you would have constant feedback and you would work on your stories again and again, and you would have to leave your ego outside because you were writing for a certain platform and a certain kind of an audience. Similarly, when I made the final shift to screenwriting, it just so happened, it wasn't planned, but it just so happened that I became a part of the Star Writers program at the Start Network, which was meant to basically train new writers to write for long format, especially for TV, because TV is a beast in itself. It requires daily writing, and I joined as a faculty member, purely because I had, not because of anything else, but because I had been a creative writer. I had no screenwriting experience, But it just so happened that while being there, my the mandate, the part of my job was to actually read up a lot of scripts and help writers improve on their scripts. But while that was happening, I was also learning with David Freeman, who was the mentor of the course, a lot about screenwriting, because then there would be classes on different aspects of screenwriting, whether it was character development or plot or building intrigue in the long format, how to keep the arc going, how to keep, you have to write for, like, you're writing for 300 episodes, 500 episodes sometimes, and there are character journeys, and there are multiple tracks that you're writing. So how do you navigate your way through it as a writer? So I was learning all of that, and I was implementing all of that because I was constantly reading scripts, not only which were available online or had been made, but also something that the new writers were writing. So in that sense, I was literally in a classroom setting where I was learning screenwriting, and that made my transition to screenwriting extremely easy. So I think I've been very, very fortunate to be in one such setup.
Wonderful, great. So we don't have much time, as I'm getting these messages from Hemant and the team that we have about 7 to 8 minutes. So just the last round of questions for three of you. Could you just briefly touch upon your current work in progress project, or your book which is coming out next? So like Mona, will start with you.
Okay, thank you, Kanchana. It's always so gratifying and heartening to talk about your once books. So I will be coming out with my ninth work that's called the Devya Sutras. The Devya Sutras has the 24 stories from the various 18 Mahapuranas. I have culled out these stories keeping in mind something that will work well with the present generation. There will not be many verticals that they will be questioning. There will be things that they will be agreeing with, and also a potent message that the story should carry. There were various things why I chose this particular work. One was because it was bending and the stereotypes, the biases. It was talking about dilute sexual boundaries. It was talking about transgenders, and it was busting so many myths that we carry, and so many stereotypes and the biases that needed to be busted. And that is the reason I chose, and also for the younger and the present generation to understand that just because something is ancient, it does not mean that it is obsolete. कोई चीज प्राचीन है तो वो जर्जर नहीं है. If it is old,
True.
it is, and it still stays and still commands our attention. Goes on to explain there has to be something very enriching and very interesting about this.
Wonderful. Anu, what is your next project after Arya 2? What are you working on? What can we look forward from your
That's the thing about being a screenwriter. Till the time it is released, you do not know. So there are a
okay.
couple of things happening. A show of mine is on the floors. It's being shot as we talk. But I'm very excited about the next book that I'm working on, which is
Okay.
actually a love story. It's called Tedha Love Meri Story.
Okay.
Um, uh, uh,
Is it in
uh,
Hindi? Which language
it,
is it in?
it will be in Hindi. Hindi is my
Okay.
first language, and when I'm writing books, I'm the most comfortable in writing in my mother tongue. Other
Okay.
than that, hopefully this year there'll be a film, but unfortunately I can't talk much about it. Uh,
So is it going to be a thriller, a love story, a horror? What? Is it going to be a thrilling woman-centric story? Just something that you can tell. I
yes,
mean,
yes, yes. So it has a female protagonist, and it looks at what I call Angan angst.
okay.
Basically the story of a woman who navigates her way through her inner, like the kitchen and the family. So
Wonderful.
it's
Wonderful.
going to be a
Great.
relationship drama.
Great. So we look forward to that. Harshali, you are next. Please tell us about your book, the third in the series, which is going to be released in few weeks' time.
Yeah, so the Paradox of Dreams is the third book in the Haveli series. And in keeping with the Haveli series, it also celebrates and explores relationships. And it is basically the personal quest of Charu, who's the third daughter of the Sharma family. She's come back to the Haveli and she wakes up from a nightmare and answers a phone call from an old friend who's the minister of state, and he asks her to locate his kidnapped younger daughter. So the paradox is in the context of the young girl that she sees in her nightmares, and also the child who is kidnapped. It's a juxtaposition of Charu's internal and external quest to reach a very successful resolution. It is also a look at different family dynamics, her Charu's abandonment issues that stems from her parents sending her to her grandmother's house in Surat, and the Chauhan family who have a strange undertow that Charu can sense. It is The Paradox of Dreams is a very character driven book that amalgamates drama and mystery. And so the two things that I'd like to tell you about the book is that it is revealed why Charu calls Haveli Anwar, and why was she sent to Surat. So these are the things that we get to answer,
Great.
get to the questions that have been asked continuously in the first two books get answered in the third book. So it is in a way moving forward from there. So that
Okay,
is.
great. Lovely. And with that, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you, Team She the People, once again for having us all over and giving us the opportunity of talking about our creative process, about writing. And like I end with the note, as I always do, that please do buy our books, support authors, support publishing houses, because if you don't read and if you don't buy our books, there's nothing worse than that, as recent events have unfolded and proven to us. So don't wait for a publishing house to shut shop and then rush to buy their books. Please do pick up the books and support Indian authors. Read us, read our books, and all of us are on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. So please do visit our pages for more information. And thank you once again, Mona, Anu, Harshali, for being with me together. And I hope you had a good time. I had a